In our next section, we will identify the platforms the game will be playable on. In our example of Tempered Steel, since we are making a browser-based web game, we chose our platforms as PCs and smart devices. Moving on, our next section is where we will discuss the game genre. Keep in mind, many games may cross over into more than one genre. For example, Tempered Steel has elements of both MMO and strategy genres. Now we come to everyone's favorite part of the GDD, the core gameplay section. This is where we will discuss the mechanics and gameplay of our game. At first, we don't need a complete and final list of our mechanics. For now, is enough just to give a few elements of gameplay to get us started. As we continue to develop our game, this section will become more and more detailed and full. Overall, this is where we refer to details on combat, exploration, puzzles, and all other gameplay components. Now we move on to the visual style section. Here we will describe what the game will look like. If we are not yet sure what it will look like, we can begin to break down our concept's most obvious environments to get us started. So even if we don't have any illustrations yet, we can begin to describe what we want our game to look like with text. At this stage, this can be very simple. For example, in Tempered Steel, we list out natural terrain, human constructions, unnatural terrain, characters, and items in the game. Next we come to our character section. Here we will have detailed descriptions of all the game's characters, including the personality quirks and physical descriptions. Even games that are not story-based can have characters. Pac-Man is a character. So is the ship in Asteroids. You don't need novel-like backstories describing characters, but keep in mind some description is better than none. For other games, like RPGs, characters will be much more detailed. As with characters, it can be quite surprising how much story even simple games have. The story section is where we will detail our plot, any scripted sequences, and any cinematics or cutscenes that will be in the game. The last section we're going to discuss for our GDD is the sound section. Now, even with only a basic concept of our game, we should be able to start imagining some of the sounds. For example, in Tempered Steel, we know we're going to want a world theme, which is going to be background music. We're going to want a combat theme for when armies clash on the field of battle. We're going to want sound effects for the swords and shields and horses on that field of battle. We might want a marketplace theme. And we definitely want a messenger ping sound effect for our messenger boards. In Hollywood, a professional screenplay has a particular format that is considered industry standard. In the video game industry, the equivalent, the Game Design Document, or GDD, is a much looser template that so far has no industry standard. That said, there are still some core elements that no matter how the document is structured, every game design document should have. Remember, these are just examples to help give an idea of what goes into a typical game design document. That said, every GDD is unique. The most important thing is to document the development of a game in enough detail that everyone is on the same page and has the same vision of what the game will be, especially early on. Hey, let's make a video game. Let's set it in space. No, a volcano. Now, we need some allies, some monsters, mechanics. How about some music? Another mechanic. Storyboards, more mechanics, concept art. We haven't even yet started talking about target audience, programming language, content ratings. It all starts to become a bit overwhelming. We start to lose track of things. Where is this game set again? The ocean? It starts to feel like we're drowning. As we can see, video game development has a lot going on. Game designers, artists, programmers, all working together and separately toward the same goals. But without documentation of these goals, we greatly increase our chance of making mistakes. Or even simply not having everyone seeing the same vision for the game. That is why a game design document is so crucial to successful video game development. In this module, we're going to take a close look at different methods of documenting game development. Our first topic will be core elements of a game design document, where we will delve into the elements of a standard GDD. Then we will look at variations on the GDD structure to see how different templates can work for different styles of games. Finally, we'll conclude with a brief look at a technical design document to fully flesh out and understand the advantages of documentation in video game development. Okay, the first consideration for our GDD is the game concept. This will describe what our game is in very brief terms. This section does not have to lay out much in the way of gameplay or mechanics. That will come later. For now, the idea is to create excitement over the general theme and concept of the game. So we will decide the basic setting and the type of gameplay we will be developing. So in this topic, we're going to talk about variations on the game design document structure and why we might choose a different template for different kinds of games. So in Hollywood, the film script is a fairly standard format across television and movies, but in game development, the game design document is not so standard. Rather, game design documents are written in the style or format that best describes the particular game they're trying to make. So in that regard, all GDDs are always custom to the project. So why would we want to be different? Well, the problem with every game using the same GDD structure is they begin to look the same. While this can be a good thing in terms of evenness and consistency, it can stifle creativity. In addition, because of the massive diversity in game design and styles, also be the case that one particular layout of the GDD just fits a certain game better than another. And often we will take in platform considerations, genre considerations, and mechanical considerations when choosing a template for our GDD. So first we'll talk about platform considerations. The platform we choose for the game could have an effect on the game design document template we want to use. Remember, the platform is the system or format the game is played on, and each format or each platform has its own issues, benefits, and complications that can be highlighted with a proper fitting GDD template. So perhaps the template has extensive sections for controller actions. Or perhaps if we are making a game for mobile devices, it would be convenient to have sections on microtransactions or expanded content. The point is choosing a template made for a simple game is not going to work well for a large complicated game. And platform is going to have some implications on that complication. So how do genre considerations affect our GDD template? Well, certain templates will be better suited for laying out certain genre gameplay elements. For example, MMORPG might need lots of sections on character options, such as classes and skill trees. In this case, we would choose a GDD style that clearly represented sections on these elements instead of, say, a very basic GDD template for a 2D platform jumper. Much like the other considerations we've looked at, gameplay or mechanics has the same needs for a properly formatted GDD. Simple games with a few play options or mechanics don't need a GDD template built to organize a massive amount of mechanics. And in reverse, we don't want to choose a simple GDD template for a game with a lot of complexity. So when it gets right down to it, every game design document is unique. It really doesn't matter what template we choose, because one way or another, the document's format will eventually be adjusted to fit the needs of the game and the development team. But it will certainly be easier to choose a template that most closely fits the platform, genre, and mechanics early on, but there will be so much iteration and documentation that in the end, all GDs will be custom and unique. So deciding on what hardware to develop comes next, and this is another important decision for the TDD. There's usually a cost-benefit assessment to be done with considering what quality of hardware will be needed for the project. You may ask yourself, does the project require state-of-the-art computers, or can it be done with lesser machines? You might ask about audio equipment. Are we going to record voices? Anyway, this is where all this information will be put into the TDD, where we lay out all our hardware requirements to develop the game. Next, we're going to look at programming language. And choosing the most efficient and workable programming language for the project is perhaps the most important decision any development team will make. Is C# the best choice? Is there another language that's better for the game you want to do? Each game will have its own demands and an optimal choice for coding language. Typically, all the code written will be documented in the TDD. All right, you may consider also a game engine. It's not required, but many development projects benefit from a game engine. And the choice of a game engine is separate from software because although not every project will use an engine, all projects will use some sort of software. So we keep them separate. Later in this curriculum, we're going to look more closely at game engines and how they can help a project. But for now, we just want to know that a game engine can be a huge boon to game development, and the choice will be reflected across the development strategy and documented in the TDD. So next is data sharing. And data sharing and network are two more technical elements that may not cross the mind of the typical game designer, but they can be very important. And although not every game requires networking or data sharing, when a game does utilize this level of technology, it can be quite complex. So once again, these kinds of high-tech systems are usually fully described in the technical design document. So we're going to also put in our technical design document whatever software for sound we choose. Now in our GDD, we listed off some of the general sounds that we're going to have in the game, but this is a little different. This is not what the game will sound like, but it's really the instruments or software that will be used to utilize to actually create the sounds and the music for the game. It's more software, but like with the game engine, it's important enough to deserve its own section of the TDD. So these are the broad categories of information that will be placed into a game's technical design document. There's many other details left out of this topic as they become more technical and we need to understand at this stage. The other elements could include information on camera views, technical design details, saving the game, server information, all that math, generating textures, and much, much more. So now we're going to look at the elements of a technical design document. And although for the purposes of this game design curriculum, we're not going to fully examine the technical design document, it's still important to know its functions and what kind of things are going to be in that document. So the technical design document, also known as a TDD, is a companion to the game design document. So where the game design document lays out the gameplay, plot, and visuals of the game, the technical design document will show the actual technical components that will make the game work. So these elements are going to broadly include software, hardware, programming language, the game engine, data sharing and networking, and sound software. So first let's take a look at the software. And there are many software options to help build and implement a game on a platform or multiple platforms. And these are the integrated development environment software that we talked about and the software development kits that we mentioned in an earlier topic. And many editor tools come with these kits and for game development. So this section of the GDD could also include art making software such as Photoshop. Many studios use Microsoft Word and Excel, among other things that can be a great boon to the development process.